Coming up today, the National Assembly remains at a standstill after the rival parties clashed on the very first day of the regular session. The impasse leaves a multi-billion-dollar supplementary budget bill in limbo. Topping expectations, the Korean economy grows 0.8% in the second quarter of the year on the back of stronger local demand and exports. First Typhoon Namtheun is bearing down on Japan. Korea is starting to feel the storm's indirect effects as heavy rain lashes Jeju Island and other regions down south. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 2nd of September. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. We are going to start at the National Assembly, where the political gridlock continues on this Friday after the Assembly Speaker's remarks on Thursday, which outraged many lawmakers. Parliament's entire schedule has been put on hold. For more, we go to our Shin Se-min, who's standing by at the Assembly. Se-min, do we have any new developments? I understand the Speaker met with the leader of the ruling party this morning.
Well, yes, Mark. A little over 2 hours ago, the floor leader of the ruling Saenuri Party, Hanjin Shipping, met with the Assembly Speaker to try to sort out their differences. But that was behind closed doors, so we don't exactly know what was said by the two. But one thing's for sure, that Chung Tae-gyun, the Assembly Speaker, is under pressure to either give up his post or hand over his authority to the Vice Speaker. And we're waiting to hear Speaker's stance later today. But aside from that, the ruling party lawmakers held a general meeting earlier this morning to look for a way through the current political impasse. And Mark, just to go back, the entire uproar grew out of the Speaker's opening address on Thursday at the start of the Assembly's regular session, where Chung criticized the government's handling of the deployment of the U.S. missile defense system, THAAD, and called for the resignation of an embattled aide to President Park, who remains in his position while under investigation by the prosecution.
OK then, Se-min, so we're still at the point where we're waiting for some kind of development there. What actually are the chances the session will resume today so Parliament can get on with business?
Well, for now, what the Speaker says later today will be the key to getting on with the new Assembly session. And apart from that, there is no guarantee that it'll restart today. At the same time, all lawmakers are under pressure to bring a vote on the supplementary budget bill that was initially promised for yesterday during the session's first day. And all lawmakers are well aware that putting off the bill will only do harm to the local economy. So we're hoping to hear some of the progress soon. Mark?
Yeah, we certainly are waiting for some progress there. That was our Shin Se-min at the National Assembly on the political standoff there. We'll have further developments throughout the day. Now, staying with domestic politics, President Park Geun-hye embarks on an 8-day trip this afternoon to attend back-to-back summits in Russia, China and Laos. During her stay in Vladivostok, she's expected to hold bilateral talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin, seeking stronger international unity against North Korea's evolving nuclear and missile program. She's also expected to hold one-on-one talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping in an effort to bring China closer to Seoul's position on the deployment of the U.S. THAAD missile defense system to counter those threats. Regarding the U.S. missile defense system, President Park said in an interview with Russia's state-run news agency that THAAD won't be necessary once North Korea's nuclear threats are eliminated. Now, North Korea's launch last week of a ballistic missile from a submarine showed the pace of its weapons development, but some experts say the regime might not wait to perfect the technology before deploying it. Connie Kim has the details.
Experts say North Korea could deploy a submarine equipped with a ballistic missile for propaganda effects, even if it hasn't fully developed the technology. Speaking at a conference on Thursday, the head of North Korea monitoring website 38 North, Joel Witt, said Pyongyang could claim to have deployed a missile-capable sub sooner than 2019. Witt said the sub might not be a military threat, but would send shockwaves through the international community. North Korea military expert Joseph Bermudez from All Source Analysis said Pyongyang has in the past deployed weapons for propaganda rather than military purposes. Researcher John Silling from Aerospace Corporation also said North Korea could send a sub out into the EC with 1 or 2 ballistic missiles, but likely as a show of force. The experts say North Korea is still testing out its technology, and at least 1 or 2 SLBM launches are needed to prove its credibility. Pyongyang has fired 3 SLBMs this year, with the most recent one flying some 500 kilometers. South Korean military officials have predicted it'll take at least 2 years to deploy a missile sub, but some experts say that could be brought up to early next year. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, annual joint drills between South Korea and the United States, the Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise, are set to end today. The drills began on August 22nd, involving 50,000 South Korean and 25,000 US military personnel, along with 9 other countries that provide forces to the United Nations Command. This year's exercise ran through wartime scenarios, applying Operations Plan 5015, which involves launching a preemptive strike on a North Korean nuclear or missile base during a crisis. North Korea condemned the exercise throughout and test-fired a submarine ballistic missile on the drill's 3rd day. A South Korean military official said Ulchi Freedom Guardian strengthened the joint military readiness of South Korea and the United States. The South Korean economy posted moderate growth in the second quarter, but concerns linger about the strength of the economy, with GDP growth remaining stubbornly under 1%. Kim Min-ji has the details.
Korea's economic growth rate has been in the 0% range for 3 straight quarters now, fueling concerns the country may be falling into a low growth trap. The Bank of Korea says the country's GDP rose 0.8% in the April to June period from the previous quarter. Modest but better than the first quarter, which saw growth of just 0.5%.
Second quarter growth was mainly led by a rise in private consumption. Spending contributed 1.2 percentage points to GDP growth, turning around from negative 0.2 percentage points in the first quarter.
In fact, private consumption was up 1% on quarter. That's in stark contrast to the first 3 months of the year when spending had dropped 0.2%. Investment in construction jumped more than 3%, while facilities investment was up 2.8%. But the country's growth rate down the line is murky. The uncertainties ahead include a possible interest rate hike in the U.S. and the government's ongoing corporate restructuring drive. The Bank of Korea expects the economy to grow 2.7% this year, down 0.1 of a percentage point from its earlier forecast made in April. To prop up the economy, the central bank has kept its key rate at a record low of 1.25% since June, while the government has also drawn up an aggressive stimulus package worth roughly $10 billion. But some analysts say those efforts may be cancelled out to a degree by delays in the implementation of the stimulus and the country slowing exports. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
A local court has approved Hanjin Shipping's bankruptcy filing. The decision to help restructure the shipper was made with unprecedented speed, but watchers say getting the company back on its feet will be a mammoth task. Hwang Ho-jun reports.
What people thought would take about a week was done within 48 hours. Hanjin Shipping, once Korea's biggest shipping firm, has been deemed fit to survive. The Seoul Central District Court decided late Thursday to put the ailing company under court-led restructuring, providing as much help as possible to ensure Hanjin stays afloat. The court said it took into consideration Hanjin's, quote, presence in the local shipping industry and its impact on the economy as a whole. In spite of the court's decision to resuscitate the company, the road to normalization will be a grind. In the 24 hours that followed Hanjin's decision to file for court receivership, ports around the world, including those in China, Spain, and the US, denied access to Hanjin ships over fears the firm's creditors could seize the cargo vessels before they dock, not to mention the ships potentially not being able to pay their fees. In fact, a smaller-sized Hanjin vessel, the Hanjin Rome, was seized by a creditor in Singapore late on Monday. Experts say more docks around the world will follow suit. The Wall Street Journal reports U.S. exporters are jostling to rebook containers with other carriers to reload their cargoes ahead of the retail boom that accompanies Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and Christmas. Hanjin Shipping has halted its operations, and with global market share of 2.9%, the drop in tonnage will likely lead to skyrocketing costs.
Shipping companies have a lot of customers outside of Korea, so Hanjin's case is rather a global public concern with a greater impact on other companies.
The court will likely issue a preservation order and a comprehensive stay order, which will bar Hanjin's creditors from seizing ships from overseas. Hyundai Merchant Marine, Korea's #2 shipper, has added 13 ships on routes to the American and European regions to replace Hanjin Shipping's capacity. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The eldest son of the founder of Korean retail giant Lotte Group is back home this afternoon after a grueling 17-hour questioning session at the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office. Shin Dongjoo was quizzed over allegations he received over $35 million from the group's major affiliates. Prosecutors suspect he received the money as a stipend by just being listed as a board member of the companies between 2006 and 2015. Shin refused to answer reporters' questions when he left the prosecutor's office at 3 a.m. Korea time. Some sources say he admitted to accepting the money, but that has not been confirmed. There's an ongoing probe into Lotte Group's irregularities that include the creation of massive slush funds and embezzlement. The head of the IMF is urging global leaders to undertake forceful policies to avoid getting stuck in a prolonged period of low economic growth. Christine Lagarde says inaction is a risk too large to take. Her remarks come as leaders of G20 nations prepare to meet in China this weekend. Park Jong-hong has the details.
A sobering warning from the head of the International Monetary Fund. Christine Lagarde is calling on world leaders to take decisive action to revitalize the sluggish global economy. Her remarks come as G20 leaders prepare to gather in the Chinese city of Hangzhou this weekend. Lagarde said the world is facing what she referred to as a, quote, low-growth trap of high debt, weak demand, eroding workforces and labor skills, weakening incentives for investment, and slowing productivity.
We are not getting very good signals, and we will probably be revising slightly down our forecast for growth in 2016.
Lagarde also noted that as of 2016, global economic growth had stagnated for 5 years below the 3.7% average that was prevalent between 1990 and 2007. She said weak global growth coupled with rising economic inequality feeds a political climate in which countries resort to inward-looking policies. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
Global oil prices slumped on Thursday on rising U.S. stockpiles. West Texas Intermediate for October delivery dropped $1.54, or almost 3.5%, to settle at a 3-week low of just over $43 a barrel. Brent crude futures ended the session at $45.45, also down more than 3%. The decline came after the U.S. Energy Information Administration reported domestic crude supplies rose by 2.3 million barrels in the last week, more than double what the market had expected. Inventories of diesel and heating oil rose nearly 10 times that of estimates. Singapore is battling an outbreak of the Zika virus. The number of locally transmitted Zika virus infections in that country has jumped to 151 in just 6 days. 31 new cases were confirmed on Thursday alone, including for the first time a woman who is pregnant. Singapore's Ministry of Health and the National Environment Agency said 3 of the latest cases represent a potential new cluster of infections. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong warns that Singapore must assume Zika is elsewhere in the country, apart from locations that have seen the majority of cases so far. The National Environment Agency called for residents to cooperate with the agency and allow its officers to inspect their premises for mosquito breeding and spray insecticide to kill any mosquitoes. And officials in the U.S. state of Florida have discovered mosquitoes carrying the Zika virus in Miami Beach, further confirming reports of local transmission of the illness there as well. According to the Florida Agriculture Department, 3 mosquito samples tested positive from a small area in Miami Beach where intensified mosquito control measures are being implemented. Health authorities say so far 49 people in Florida have contracted the virus locally, but until now, authorities had not found any infected mosquitoes. Since the 3 infected samples were recovered, 95 more samples have tested negative. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended that Miami Beach be sprayed from the air, but the mayor of Miami-Dade County says that would only be a last resort. Now, the Global Tech Consumer Gala IFA kicks off in Berlin on this Friday, along with CES in Las Vegas and the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. IFA is considered one of the top 3 tech and home appliance exhibitions. Organisers say this year's main themes are Internet of Things, virtual reality, 3D printing and smart networking. Korean tech giants Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics will be pitching their latest innovations at the show. More than 1,800 exhibitors will pack into the Berlin Expo City Center City, a 26-building complex covering 170,000 square meters. IFA is open to the public and admission is expected to top last year's draw of about 240,000. The exhibition will run through next Wednesday. Now, we are going to take a quick look at the weather because southern parts of Korea are seeing heavy rain this afternoon. More than 100 millimeters have already fallen on Korea's southern Jeju Island, while other areas have seen up to 70 millimeters. These areas are coming under the indirect influence of Typhoon Namtheun that's currently barreling toward Japan. Korea's weather agency expects up to 150 millimeters of rain in Gyeongsang-namdo province on Friday, around 80 millimeters in Gangwon-do and Jeollanam-do provinces, and 60 in Jeollabuk-do province. There will also be sporadic thunderstorms and gusty winds down south, so take the necessary precautions if you have to go out in that kind of weather. Korea's central region, including Seoul, can expect some showers later, but they'll be much lighter than the rest of the country. And that is where we're going to leave it on this Friday lunchtime here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for tuning in. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Next bulletin coming up at 3 p.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.